All right, guys, I'm going to share with you our secret weapon that we used at Escape Climbing to pretty much demolish our competition. Um, Even though we were severely the underdogs when we're starting off. And the reason we were severely underdogs is because manufacturing is a very hard business to get into. We were manufacturing polyurethane rock climbing holds, and we were importing hardware from overseas for the purposes of building climbing gyms, right? So building a manufacturing environment and importing large-scale hardware is very logistically difficult and very asset intensive. So you requires a ton of investment into infrastructure and into logistical systems. And so it tends to lend itself towards the incumbents. Now, I'm going to describe for you this business, this industry, in more detail than you probably care. But I'm going to describe it to you because it's important for you to understand the dynamics of how it applies to other industries as well. Because this is a very cut and dried way to show what's happening. And I just had this conversation with the news the other day as he had this new idea for a business that he wanted to explore. And I said, okay, well, here's what you need to be thinking about. But the number one idea, I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm not going to make you listen to the entire podcast here to get the one golden nugget. But if you really want to understand the depth of this golden nugget, you're going to need to stick around as I unpack it. So the idea is simply this. Whoever is closest to the consumer wins. Whoever is closest to the consumer wins. So let's unpack this. In the world of the rock climbing hold industry, there are two different individuals, two different companies. There are the brands, and then there are the manufacturers. So you could take the same idea and you could take it to clothing, right? So most clothing brands out there right now, you have influencers who create their clothing line, but they're not actually manufacturing it, right? What they're doing is they're going to a toll manufacturer. They're paying somebody else to manufacture the clothing, to do the printing and all that stuff. It usually goes somewhere overseas, right? And then they take that and they distribute it. They sell it to their customers because the influencer, they have access to the attention, the eyeballs, the audience, but they don't have the production capacity. And so they partner with somebody who does. Now, here's the problem is that there's very few production facilities in the world. There are very many different brands. And so what ends up happening is all of those different brands, they go to the same manufacturer to produce the clothing. So is it any surprise to hear that like Nike and Lululemon and Patagonia, they're all made at the same manufacturer? I don't know if that's true. But generally speaking, like there are a handful of manufacturers that produce the majority of all products that are coming out in the clothing industry. It's the same in the climbing industry with holds. There were two large manufacturers, one in Europe and one here in the United States, that were responsible for the 90% of the manufacturing and distribution of climbing holds. And then there were all these little satellite brands. These are the people that would shape the holds, and they would have access to the audience to sell those holds. So they would create their website, they would do their marketing, they'd bring customers, they'd make sales, and then those sales would go to the manufacturer to produce and ship to the customer. Okay, so in this chain, there is the customer that wants the holds. There is the brand person who's designing the holds and who has like the front end sales and the audience awareness. They're doing the marketing. And then there's the fulfillment behind that, right? So what we did that was different is in the beginning, we said, okay, we don't want to be this person, the manufacturer, and we don't want to be this person, the middleman. We want to be the closest to the consumer. And you have to ask yourself, who is the consumer here? There's actually two consumers. There is the person buying the climbing holds. They're buying from the brand. But then the brand is buying from the manufacturer. So there's two customers here. There's a middleman. And our approach was let's cut out the middleman and go direct to the customer. So we became the brand and the manufacturer all in one. So when the customers would come to our website, when they would buy from us on our Amazon page, let's say, it would be the website, the branding, the audience that we attracted, and then our facility fulfilled. So if we were a clothing company, we'd have our own manufacturing, and we're the only ones that were doing that. Now, here's why this is interesting, is because in that model, that previous model of brand and then manufacturer, they were really only selling meaningful numbers to climbing gyms. Because to justify the margins that were required in that setup with all the different middlemen, you couldn't afford just to sell small one-off packages to the Tom over in suburban America that wants to build a climbing wall in his backyard for his kids, right? But because we were integrated with the whole system, we could sell directly to the gym and make $100,000 order, or we could sell a $100 hold to gym. Right? So we serviced both of those markets because we were the closest to the consumer. We had that ability. There was no middleman between us and them. So we had more control over our distribution, our marketing, our pricing. Now, in 2020, something interesting happened. If you remember, there was a global pandemic. You might have forgotten. And overnight, all the gyms were closed. So overnight, all of those brands that had sprouted up and made their business off the back of selling unique, interesting shapes to those gyms. And then they could justify it because the manufacturer behind that was producing them in large bulk. And then they could, give good discounts on that. Those gyms shut down. There were no orders coming in. So suddenly those brands couldn't sustain themselves and the manufacturers lost all this business. Well, we continued to thrive during that period of time because we had half our business going to the gyms and half going to the consumers because we were the closest to the consumer. There was no middleman between us and them. So we had more control. And so overnight, all those gyms shut down and the business boomed off the back of all these people suddenly wanting to go home and continue climbing. And so they wanted to build a climbing wall in their backyard. Well, who do they go to? The only people who are around who are fulfilling. That was us. And so we took this large market share and we thrived during 2020. And then as we came out of quarantine, the gyms came back, there were fewer brands to order from. So now overnight, all the business just went to us by default because there was nobody else to go to. So right there is that idea of whoever is closest to the consumer wins. Cutting out middleman at every point of the equation. We went one step further when it came to importing hardware from China. We went direct to the manufacturer. We had the relationship with them. We didn't use any 3PLs or third-party logistics planners. So like we did all of the planning for the shipments coming overseas. A lot harder, but then when 3PLs and the ports and everything went under and went into quarantine, we had more control, right? We had more margin to work with. Now, I'm not saying that that's the best way to build a business because it's very difficult. You have to control way more levers. Here's why I share this with you though, is it's critical that you understand where you fall in the chain. Are you just a brand on the front that's drop shipping from the manufacturer, but you don't actually have any control over the quality of the product, the timeline of the product, the pricing of the product? If you don't have any control of that, then you're just a marketing company. That's fine, but understand that that's who you are. If you are behind that and you are the manufacturer, then you're a different beast. You're a completely different beast, right? And I share this with you because I find a lot of people don't understand the value ladder and where they fall into it. And by not knowing that, you can't appropriately differentiate yourself from the competitors. Now, I'm going to give you another little secret here because this idea of being closest to the consumer, there's another aspect of this that if you've stayed this long, I'm going to share with you because this right here can make you millions. And this is, I don't think I've really talked about this before, but if you can articulate to your customer more specifically who they are than anybody else can and how your product can help them specifically better than anybody else can, you're going to win. So being close to the consumer also means being most linked in their mind to who they are and how your product helps them specifically. So let me break this down for you. The other day, Anuj shared with me this other brand. I think they're called Onset Black. Onset Black makes all black clothing for creatives and photographers, videographers. And one of their unique values is their shirt is made of like a microfilm material. So if you're a photographer, you can clean off your lens while you're on set, right? So what they did is they niched down and got super specific. They got super close to the consumer. And they said, we know creatives, videographers, the problems that they have. And they geared everything that they do to that demographic. So, I have a split hem shirt because I don't want my ass to show when I'm constantly bending over doing shoots, right? shit, all my shirts have split hems. I'm not a creative, but because they can articulate that feature in a way that resonates with their target, they're entering into the conversation that's already occurring inside of their consumer's mind. And their consumer then goes, that person gets me. And so all things being equal, when that consumer who is a 22-year-old white male videographer in LA, when he goes to buy a new shirt, who is he more likely to buy from? The person who just puts out a black shirt with a split hem and this nice material, or the company who's like, we are entirely designed for the creative videographer, photographer. This is the best shirt in the world, best technical wear for this demographic. He goes to buy something and he goes, oh, they get me. I'm going to buy that. Same way as if your product is designed for a 32-year-old mother of, a 3-year-old who, sitting around at home all day with their kids looking for fun things to do to entertain and educate them, right? If you can enter into their mind and say, this product is the best product for that, you're going to win. Now, it could be the same exact product that you market to 52-year-old, Indian American males, just entering into the conversation that's in their mind differently. So whoever's closest to the consumer, and that starts with empathizing and understanding who is your prospect, what are their problems, and what are their psychographics. So we covered a lot of ground. We covered so much ground in this podcast today, guys. I don't even know how we got here. Hopefully you found this valuable. Hopefully that you got a couple of gold nuggets out of this. But if I had to break this down to two things. Number one, understand where your unique value is in the value ladder. What makes you differentiate in the marketplace? Are you the brand, the marketing? Are you the manufacturer, production? Where are you? Just understand that and understand the global implications of where you stand, what makes you strong and what makes you vulnerable. Number two is get really hyper specific about who your demographic is that you serve, and then make sure everything that you say and do is aligned with the narrative that's already playing out inside of their mind. And that is how you make millions of dollars. It's the riches are in the niches, my bitches. Okay, that's going to do it for me, guys. See you guys in the next episode.